So saveourwallets.org. That's the website. You can go there, learn more about it. It's about the BRCA bill that's been proposed in Congress. It's quite simple. I mean, I talked about it last show too, but I'll just summarize it again because it's important. One, it's protecting open source developers, that they cannot be held legally liable for software they write and publish, against being considered like an MSB or a money transmitter or something. Two is services or businesses that don't custody customers' funds also should not be considered this bill. It's like a one-page bill. Anyone can read this and understand it. It just clarifies if you don't custody customer funds, you cannot be considered a money transmitter.
That's awesome.
And this matters for a lot of, any developer, but also many companies in this space. We briefly mentioned Phoenix Wallet a few minutes ago. They exited the United States for about a year, a little over a year ago, and just re-entered. Why did they exit? Well, Samurai got sued, and Tornado Cash was being prosecuted. Both Tornado Cash and Samurai are being prosecuted, both of which are self-custody services. And so Phoenix got, scared and exited.
Just like out of caution, right? They just
they didn't want to go to prison.
Yeah. And it wasn't,
they didn't want 25 years in prison.
Like a ton of people. Around that same time, Alby shut down their custodial wallet in the United States and everywhere. Kian decided to go all in on Oxio. That was all around the same time. All the companies freaked out, basically.
And so with the new administration, now Phoenix is back in the U.S. App Store. But, the way the government works, like in 3 years, Trump's no longer going to be president. There will be a new president. And that new administration...
Steve Bannon said otherwise.
Yeah, well... At some point.
Elon's going to last 40 years, right?
But an executive order doesn't have as much staying power as a bill like law passed by Congress.
Yeah.
So that's why this is important. It probably doesn't. Well, who knows? Right now is a wild card with the Trump administration, but who knows what will happen in the next few years. But definitely in 3 years, it could be a very different environment. So let's pass this bill now to just clarify what to me seems like the obvious, that developers should not be prosecuted.
Writing code, you should not be responsible.
Writing code and publishing open source code, you should not be prosecuted. And if you're running a service where you do not custody the funds, you shouldn't be held. You shouldn't be held to a standard of requiring an MSB license. And let me give you some examples of what those are. I mentioned Phoenix. Well, that's one. So they run a Lightning wallet, and they do have a Lightning node which provides liquidity, but it doesn't custody customers' funds.
By not custodying, you mean Phoenix has open source software. You set up the wallet, and are they somehow how are they not custodying your funds?
Because you're custodying your funds?
Okay, but I'm not running.
Let's say you have 200,000 Bitcoin in your balance, and so you have a Lightning channel with them. You have 200,000 Bitcoin in your side. They might have 100,000 Bitcoin on their side. So they custody their 100,000. You custody your 200,000. You have the private keys in your phone.
But
so
the tricky thing is
they can't steal your money. You custody your funds.
They're a Lightning service provider, and so this whole idea, there, I guess, was a lack of clarity for all routing nodes. And by the way, I can say there was a chilling effect even in companies that are not public in my portfolio that also stopped running swap services, Lightning nodes, all kinds of things right around then. And so one thing that I would love to say, and I'm not sure if the bill would include this, but any Lightning node operator, like anyone that's doing routing, would that be included or no?
Yes.
That's awesome.
The way the language is written in Emmer's bill, the BRCA Act.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure I explained it correctly, though. With
I
Phoenix,
understand. If I have 200,000 Bitcoin in my Phoenix wallet and they have 100,000 Bitcoin, I don't think I understand what.
So when you open a channel, right? Yeah. So in the way the Lightning Network works, you have a channel which is a 2 of 2 multisig. And so basically we both commit, I have some Bitcoin on my side, the abacus is the sort of analogy I always use. So let's say I have 200,000 beads on my side, 100,000 beads on your side. Every time we do a transaction back and forth, we're updating the state of that channel so that either of us could unilaterally exit if we write down to the base chain. So in this case with Phoenix, if they have 100,000 on their side, I have 200,000 on my side. If either of us published the pre-signed UTXO to say we're closing this channel, I would have 200,000 coins, you would have 100,000 coins. However, one could argue that like I can't use the Lightning Network without that channel. So that's where I think things were a little bit unclear.
Not really. If they disappeared, they turn their server off, you can still unilaterally exit.
Right. But so, I think the confusion was, I guess, because they like open a channel for you automatically. Or what was the confusion then?
There's nuance to a Lightning service provider. So like, for example, to create a good user experience, often providers will have a just-in-time zero conf channel opening. So if you don't have any inbound liquidity on Lightning, or you're a brand new user, then you don't want to have to wait an hour for that channel to be opened and have it be confirmed on the blockchain for 6 blocks or whatever, right? That would be a horrible out-of-box experience. So Phoenix, or whoever the wallet is, can let you spend the money immediately, even though that channel is not confirmed on chain, and which creates a double spending opportunity. But if you're like a trusted brand, that's like a reasonable trade-off, that they're not going to steal from you in the next like 10 minutes to ruin their brand.
Right.
And the user experience is dramatically better. So there's like this 10-minute window of trust there. So that's like a gray area.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some other nuance too, if you get a bunch of lawyers in a room.
Mm-hmm.
So but I mean,
those are gray areas with respect to how they would fall into or not fall into this new legislation.
No, the current law, the BSA Act, and all subsequent laws, guidelines.
But the new legislation,
laws, regulations, and guidelines. So you have to look at laws, then regulations, then guidelines by regulators. Those are like the three, and like it's rare to get perfect clarity on things. And right now there's not perfect clarity on this. That's exactly why this bill is valuable. But I just want to mention a few other examples beyond that. It extends far beyond Bitcoin, but all cryptocurrencies. If you're Coinbase is betting big on Base, their product Base. It too could become a regulatory target because they're the single sequencer in their zero-knowledge proof rollup, right? So I could absolutely imagine a future administration, a future version of FinCEN or somewhere in the Treasury going after targeting them and saying, you are an MSB, you're unlicensed, you're in trouble. And then either they get fined, go to jail, or forced to KYC everyone, which destroys a lot of the use cases that are being used on Base right now. All of DeFi would be a target. So this is not just a self-custody Bitcoin issue. It's a much broader issue. So I think Coinbase needs to, and I know Coinbase supports this, I think they need to prioritize it in DC. I think A16Z, for all the portfolio companies, they need to not just support it, but really proactively push this. And also high net worth people who donate to politicians that have a vested interest in Bitcoin or cryptocurrency at large need to be aware of this and take action.
To be fair on that, I understand it's great. We need allies like Coinbase. They spend a lot in lobby and stuff. But like, I mean, if they're the single sequencer for a chain that's effectively a MySQL database, like that does seem very different.
But they're not custodying funds.
Yeah, but like, I guess at the base level itself, no, I mean, that's a separate conversation. But great to build the tent. I would just say, at least in my mind, they're very different.
Another example is Spark.
Yeah,
from LightSpark.
That's in between.
So do you think that the government should require KYC and an MSB license for Spark?
I mean, I think the less you have to do that, the better. But I think it's very different to say what's custodial versus non-custodial. And I think it's certainly spectrum. Base seems extremely custodial to me, or at least Base is a centralized chain. Sorry, how about that? Not custodial versus non-custodial.
I think it's definitely not custodial.
Yeah,
it's not custodying any funds.
It's non-custodial in the same way that eCash is non-custodial. But then there's like the question.
I think the thing you're teasing out, which is really important, is there's custodial, non-custodial, and it's not as simple as putting two buckets. It's a spectrum. I agree for sure. And then separate from that is this trust spectrum.
Yes,
and that's
issue.
Usually where, I don't know. I mean, both conversations are important because when it comes to the law and regulations, they tend to talk about the custody part.
Right.
So I guess my feelings on all this is that for regulations, they should not consider things that are not custodial.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much anywhere on the spectrum of custodial that's not clearly custodial should not be considered an MSP.
Yep.
Separately, we have this trust spectrum, and it's very important to demand of services that they clearly communicate to their customers with transparency where they fall in that trust spectrum.
Yes.
And I think it's important to separate those two.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I was conflating those. So it's very good. It's very similar to the eCash debate where people say, is it custodial or non-custodial? Well, it's non-custodial, but you're trusting effectively a bank. And so that's a totally separate issue. Then there's the question of the privacy as well, which is its own question of should the eCash mints be able to run and not know what customers are doing once they get their tokens? But
yeah,
anyways.
But there you go, Matt. We spent a good 10 minutes on that.